And we're live. Welcome everybody to this Hangout on Air. My name is Lisette Sutherland. I'm one half of Collaboration Superpowers, and I am very excited to be presenting a conversation today amongst two of the top leadership and management thought leaders in the world, Jurgen Appelo and Bob Burg. So welcome, both of you. If there are any questions from the audience, I encourage you to ask them through the Hangout Q&A, or you can also do it through Twitter now or in the future using the hashtag M30Workout. Without further ado, Jurgen, I'll hand the conversation over to you.
All right. Thank you, Lisette. Thank you. And thanks, Bob, for joining. It is awesome to have you with us. I don't hear Bob at this time.
Oops.
Yep.
Bob, maybe you're muted.
Suddenly Bob was muted. We heard Bob just before we started.
Yep. You're muted now. Go ahead and unmute again. Try that. Not yet.
No. That's weird.
That is weird.
Everything was working fine until we went live. Maybe if can Bob rejoin us, perhaps, would that work?
That might be a good idea. Bob, you can close the Hangout and go ahead and rejoin.
A technology issue here. Yeah, let's try that.
There's always something. Every
always
Hangout brings a new
We tested
issue.
for 10 minutes. Everything was going fine. We go live, and ta-da, sound is off.
Here we go.
What about now? Is this any better?
Yes. Yes, you're back. All right.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. So, thank you for joining, Bob. Let's try again.
All right, my pleasure. Sorry about that.
No problem. It's not your fault. Let's blame the technology gods here.
I will go with that one. That works for me.
So, Bob, you wrote an awesome book, Adversaries into Allies, and I just finished reading it. And I promise you to ask some questions about it because I think it's an awesome book. And it did get me to think about a few things, and it's already working for me. I will tell you about that a bit later on. I'm already using your advice there, Bob. The first thing is this book, by the way. I have a paper print of your cover because I read the ebook version, so that's hard to show.
Yes.
The cover that I printed, Adversaries into Allies, and basically you explained to people how to be better influencers, right? How to persuade people of your good intentions, usually. So, and let me summarize your 5 principles. The first one is control your emotions, which is very hard for me, I can tell you. Second, understand the clash of belief systems, acknowledge people's egos, set a proper frame, change it from conflict into cooperation, and then 5th, communicate with tact and empathy. Now, I read this, and several times I thought, that sounds like nonviolent communication, which is a book that I read not long ago. You probably have read it as well. Can you explain what is the difference there? What do you add on top of that?
Yeah, and I loved your Management 3.0 workbook. I have it in also on in ebook form, but I want to order it, and I am ordering it so that I have it in my library as well. I'm still sort of old-fashioned, and I love the having it in my hand, and I can also reference it a little bit more. But it is absolutely a work of genius. Thank you for putting that out.
Thanks, Bob. You'll have to wait for ordering it because the Kindle version and paper version will be available later. But anyway, thank you.
2014 you wrote or something?
End of 2014, that's right.
So I'll make sure to get that. Yeah, I loved Marshall Rosenberg's book. And, it's interesting. In all the books I've read about whether it's influence skills, persuasion skills, just very positive communication skills, going back to Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, Les Giblin's How to Have Confidence and Power in Dealing with People. Gosh, so many books through the years that I've read, because I read everything I can get my hands on with that. Of course, Influencer by Patterson, I think it was last year, another great book. I read all those books, and just like Marshall Rosenberg's, I just think there's so much great information in there. I'm not sure I would be able to quantify or qualify what's necessarily different, other than I think we all have our own individual styles in which basic principles of very positive communication in a way that allows you to perhaps better understand that other person, as Stephen Covey talked about, first seek to understand and then be understood, but really to understand that other person, to understand why maybe we don't necessarily understand that other person intuitively, and then be able to communicate in a way that we allow ourselves to be understood. And the big thing, and I think you find in any of these books, it's all about helping that other person as much as ourselves. And when we do that, and you talk about it in your book certainly, when it comes to team building, to the degree that the individual can do their best to help everyone else, they benefit as a result.
Exactly. Yeah. So I agree that you read the same things in different books, and different authors have different styles to similar themes. But what I think that you pointed out rather well was the idea of having different belief systems, or I might call it mental models, but probably the same thing. Different ways of looking at the world. Where, for example, my mental model is I am always right. That's my mental model.
That's mine. Interesting how that happens. Mine too.
But I am always well there. Yeah. There we already might have a conflict of mental models, right? Right now. So I'm always right because it's easy to remember my mental model. I always know what it is. And then indeed, you as you point out, you need to know what the other person's mental model is, and then work out the differences and see the world from a different angle. I think you wrote that pretty well. But what it also made me think was when I read your book, I know some people who do not follow your principles. I'm not naming any names here. But some authors and speakers are obnoxious, arrogant narcissists, and still they are successful. Still they can persuade others and influence the world and get even more followers than you already have, Bob. How do they do that?
Well, in many ways that is true, and you see to be able to create influence, if you will. For example, let's look at the definition of influence. It's simply the ability to move a person or persons to a desired action, usually within the context of a specific goal. There are different ways to do that. You could do that in a sense through manipulation. You could do it through what I call persuasion. I believe that the two of them are cousins, because both the manipulator and the persuader both understand basic human motivation, if you will, human nature, and they know how to tap into it. And so somebody who's a manipulator, and we've seen manipulators through history have great influence, right? They were able to move people to a desired action. So influence in itself isn't necessarily good. It's not, nor is the person necessarily doing the influencing. It's what you want those results to be. And there are people, Jurgen, who are mean and nasty and have bad intent, malintent, but they're able to intuitively understand how to tap into people, and they're able to coerce and manipulate. We don't like that. We discourage that. I will say this, by and large, okay, for the most part, people who are manipulators and influenced through manipulation and coercion, which is a form of manipulation, they tend to not have very long-lasting success. And I'm not saying always, but usually. Mm-hmm. Because once you know you've been manipulated or taken advantage of or in some way played, if you will, you're going to go out of your way to resist that person. You're going to go out of your way to fight that person, to sabotage the situation, consciously or unconsciously. You're not going to buy into that person's ideas. But the person who's able to positively persuade, which means nothing more than they've tied together what you want, what you need, what you desire, along with what they're trying to accomplish. Now you both feel great about it. So that person, not only can they persuade immediately, but that persuasion tends to be for the long term. That influence tends to be for the long term.
Right, exactly. Well, I really like that difference you point out between manipulation and influence, where basically the same techniques, the same principles are being used. It's just the objectives are different. What people are persuaded to do, basically, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, right? That's
and, you know, interesting. Manipulators, Jurgen, will often tap into your weaknesses in order to get you to do their will. They'll do things in such a way that you feel badly, you feel guilty, you feel unworthy if you don't do according to their will. With a persuader, they'll tap into your strengths. They'll tap into your values. They'll say, you know, it's interesting because Dale Carnegie, one of, I think, his most profound statements in his wonderful book, the classic, How to Win Friends and Influence People, I thought what he said was great. He said, ultimately, people do things for their reasons, not our reasons. Now, that's fine. That's human nature. That's great. It means that when you really look to understand another person, you know, the great influencer, and I saw this go through your book as part of the theme. The great influencer says, hey, how does what I'm asking this person to do, how does it align with their goals, their wants, their needs, their desires, their values? And see, when we ask ourselves these questions intelligently and genuinely, authentically, not as a way to manipulate another person to do our will, but as a way to build everyone in the process, we then have come a long way toward earning commitment rather than compliance. And when it comes to influence and leadership and management, one of my great friends, Dondi Scumaci, a real mentor of mine, who is just she speaks all, like you, she speaks all over the world to the biggest companies and teams and organizations. I love what she says. Dondi says, compliance will never take you where compliance will never take you where commitment can go. Compliance will never take you where commitment can go. In other words, the great influencers know that they accomplish great things with others. And they also know that it's not about them. Great leadership is never about the leader. Great influence is never about the influencer. Great salesmanship is never about the salesperson. Who is it about? It's about that other person. It's about the person whose lives you choose to touch. Those lives you choose to add value to. But again, as you mentioned in your book, it's both. It's win-win, because to the degree that you focus on doing that, you bring everybody up.
Right, you're making other people great. Basically, that's I like that. I like that very much. You point out that in your book we have to try and stay in control of our emotions when a situation occurs where we want to go like right. And, I've read the same in other books as well. But it also made me think of some scientific insights that say that often our irrational mind has already decided how to respond to a situation, and then we only rationalize after the fact. It is very hard to control that beast in our mind. It makes me think of, you probably heard of the metaphor of the elephant and the rider, Bob. It is used in several books. I believe Jonathan Haidt and Daniel and Heath, the Heath brothers in Switch. So the elephant is the emotional part, and the rider tries to stay in control. Well, with me, the elephant is a nasty, vicious, hairy mammoth, Bob. It is a vicious beast, and it is almost uncontrollable. So how do you stay in control of an animal like that?
Well, you know, first of all, you've made great points. And as human beings, in fact, I begin the book by citing a quote from the sages that said, "Who is a mighty person?" And the answer is that person who can control their emotions and make of an enemy or of a potential enemy a friend. So that right there says it's a very special person who can control their emotions and do that. Why? Because as human beings, we are emotional creatures. We'd like to think we're logical. And to a certain extent we are, of course. But we are emotion driven. We are run by our emotions to a big extent. We make major decisions based on emotion, and then we back up those decisions with logic, or you could say we rationalize. And if you take the word rationalize, it simply means we tell ourselves rational lies. And we do that to, as you said, justify those emotional decisions. But there's another type of emotion at work here too, which is very important. And that is that while nobody can make us mad or sad or angry or what have you, they can certainly consciously or unconsciously, purposely or by accident, say or do things that push our buttons. And when that happens and we make ourselves mad, we make ourselves angry, and we react as opposed to responding, we react without thinking. And then what happens is we become a part of the problem rather than being a part of the solution. See, it's only when you can control your own emotions that you're even in the position to be able to take a potentially negative person or situation and turn it into a win for everyone involved. So the question comes up, how do you control it? And that's what you asked, and it's very, very important. The first thing you need to do is be conscious of it and understand there's an issue. I used to have a very big issue when it came to anger. I was very reactive. When someone said or did something that I felt was unjust or unfair or this or that, I reacted with, right? And it certainly wasn't helpful. It didn't make people feel good about me. It didn't make, so that was something I understood that I needed to work on. If we don't realize there's a problem, we're not going to work on it. So the first is, if you have an issue where you get emotional, whether it's anger or sadness or any other kind of negative emotion, and when I say negative, I simply mean it's controlling you. The elephant's controlling you as opposed to you controlling it. Next is rehearse. See situations in your mind that you've been in before. Well, first, that you've been in before that has pushed your buttons, that's had you become mad or angry, and see how it worked out. Now replay that scenario and see yourself handling it beautifully, thinking about it, considering what you're going to say, considering the other person's feelings and their point of view. Now look toward future situations, which probably will happen. Hey, you've got people in your life who push your buttons. You have situations, we all do, that we can pretty much predict. We don't know when it's going to happen or who it's going to be necessarily, but we know it's going to happen. And what I want you to do in this case is to go through this in your mind. See it happening clearly, that person saying or do something that would normally just elicit a horrible anger or whatever reaction, and see yourself again handling it perfectly. Now, this is similar to an astronaut, and I talk about this in the book. An astronaut, before they go into space on a mission, he or she will do hundreds and hundreds of simulations so that by the time they get up there, if something happens, and it probably will at one time or another, they're prepared for it. Now, is that the exact same as having it really happen? No, but it's close enough. We know the subconscious mind really doesn't know the difference between something that's real and something that's been suggested to it over and over and over again. So to the degree that you practice handling these situations, that's the degree you're going to find yourself making incremental improvement, and it's going to happen a lot faster than it seems. Now, two quick things, if I may. When you find yourself handling that situation terrifically, like you want, congratulate yourself. You talked in the book about giving kudos to people, right? Well, give yourself a kudo. You don't have to put it in the box like you were talking about, but you can mention it to yourself. Wow, that was terrific. I handled that one. However, there are also times you're going to mess up. I know I still do, and I think most of us do from time to time, even though we get much better at it. But what I want you to do if you do mess up like that and lose control is, you can feel a little badly about it, that's fine, but don't get all guilty over it. Don't get all, beside yourself over it, because you know what? We're human beings, and we're going to make mistakes. But to the degree that we're conscious of this, we focus on it, and we practice it, you will be absolutely amazed at the difference. You will be in control of your emotions as opposed to your emotions being in control of you.
Right. Well, what I love about your book, and you pointed out now as well, is that you refer to the simulations, to the practicing, which is sometimes something that I missed in other books, where they correctly say that you need to control your emotions in a situation that you don't like. But how do you control an elephant when a gunshot goes off? You can't in that moment, unless the elephant is trained, right? And that is exactly what you point out. There's an interesting example in my country, in the Netherlands. We have this silly annual ritual where the king presents the budget for the year for the government in September. And traditionally, the Queen, until last year, went in a golden carriage. I'm not making this up. This is all happening in a golden carriage with horses, pulled by horses, and those horses are trained, because of course nothing is allowed to happen with those horses. They cannot go and run off with the Queen or the King behind them in the carriage. So those horses are trained on the beaches with gunshots and flares or whatever until they ignore everything. And that for me was the metaphor that emerged in my head for what you were describing, basically.
Yeah, that's a great metaphor. Yeah.
Yeah,
very.
Yeah. So I love that in your book. But still, I wondered, is there a role for anger? Because if we lock everything up, if we try to control our well, in my case, my big hairy mammoth with tusks the size of canoes, that's what my elephant looks like. Then it could be bad keeping it all inside. Like you talk about adversaries. Well, my biggest adversary, it is my arch nemesis, basically, Bob. It is my dishwasher. I'm quite sure the purpose of my dishwasher is to make my life miserable. So I've been shouting at it and cursing it this very morning, and I find that's a relief. It's a relief to just letting off steam every now and then. Is there a place for that as well, do you think?
Well, first, when we talk about anger, practically anything has its time and place in proper context, including anger. When you see an injustice done to someone, someone steals something, or somebody bullies someone, or somebody, we should be angry about something like that. We're human beings, and there's nothing wrong with being angry. That's a very healthy anger. Someone, God forbid, tries to harm a friend or a family member, but of course we'd be angry. The key is to be in control of that anger, that it not be a matter of the anger controlling you. If you get so angry at someone that you decide to, do something criminal, to them, well, obviously that's not a good way to handle that anger. Mm-hmm. But if you do something in a way that is able to handle the situation in the appropriate way, so you get the results you want, but it was spurred by a very healthy anger at an injustice or something wrong being done, that's certainly fine. Mm. Now, when it comes to letting off, steam, and by the way, I can't say my dishwasher is my enemy, because I've made a point not to get to know my dishwasher that well to be in it.
I'll remember that.
Of course, the dishes pile up when that happens, but that's. But but when it comes to letting off steam, well, that's where exercising or hitting a heavy bag, a heavy bag, or lifting weights or running or something else. That's probably a healthier way of letting off steam than yelling at someone. But we all have our own ways too of letting off that steam, whether it's exercise or or what have you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that makes perfect sense. Is it? Do you think it is easier nowadays in the current age, being an influencer, being a famous person like you? Is that easier now than it was last century, until 10, 20 years ago? What do you think?
Well, I think it's. I think technology's made it easier to reach more people. At the same time, technology itself is just a tool. You know, we know that. You know, I have a saying that I talk about in most of my books, whether it's This Book One or The Go Giver or Endless Referrals, where there's always a theme that goes through, and that is all things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to, and allow themselves to be influenced by those people they know, like, and trust. It's not the computers that they know, like, and trust.
Mhm.
It's the person at that computer. So it's still all about the relationships, just like you talk about in your book. You know, you have to have the system in place, or the manager, the team in place, or the specific situation in place. But it's the person that makes the difference, because it is about people. It is about the relationships. So when you do the correct things in the relationship building process, when you do the correct things in the influence building process, sure, you're going to have more influence and be more influential. I do think social media certainly has made it a lot easier to connect with people that we may otherwise never have had the opportunity to connect with. And yet I still think it's up to the person to do those right things in the process.
Yeah, I think I agree there with you. I think it has sort of leveled the playing field. While in the past, the kind of technologies that we had, or the lack of them perhaps, favored people with certain social skills, and now others are joining the game, who have other kinds of social skills that are better suited for new technologies. Like, well, as pointed out by Susan Cain in her book about the introverts, it's much easier for introverts to become influencers through social networks, because it is a safer way to communicate with a lot of people instead of doing everything face to face.
Yeah, and I read in your book that you're an introvert, which probably surprises a lot of people. I'm very much an introvert, which surprises pretty much everyone, because most people think of introverts as being, you know, shy and laid back and nonverbal, and sort of what they don't realize necessarily is that introverts, we get our energy from being by ourselves many times and being able to be perspective. And so the internet allows an introvert to really be able to reach out to a lot of people, while at the same time having our own space when we need it as well.
Exactly, and I think I'm looking behind you, Bob, and I see a lot of books over there. I think we can recognize the introverts by the number of books they have in the background.
Yeah,
that would be my hypothesis.
Yeah, and this is just one part of, you know, where you should see the library is huge.
I can imagine. I would love to see that that sometime. So all right. So I told you about my mammoth that is sometimes running around my head, and I'll give you an example of something that happened recently. I just finished the book, as you referred to, and fortunately, lots of people love it, but there was one person who commented on my bad writing. Now, you can blame me for anything, for bad illustrations or bad social skills or whatever, but in 10 years, I've never heard someone telling me that I'm a bad writer. That is the one thing that I want to be very, very good at. So even if 1,000 people tell me that I am a good writer, that one person is destroying my whole week. And that mammoth is running around my head. I cannot sleep, and I think it's unfair. How can they say this? How do I deal with a situation like that?
Well, first, it only means you're human, because
oh, thank God.
I think we all, you know, I read the Amazon reviews of different books I've had up there. And the fact is, just, you know, not everybody's going to like it, and not everyone's going to like me, and not everyone's going to like you. And I think that's something, when we're in the public eye, to the extent we are, we just have to understand that's the case. And that doesn't mean it doesn't bother us. Because you know what? I'll look at something on Amazon, and it looks like the person didn't even read the book, that they just commented on the title or something, you know. And it's, oh, well, you know, and then you got to say, hey, you know what? That's part of life. That's the way it is. And then there's a couple things you can do with that too. One is consider the source. Well, we don't really even know the source because we don't know if is that person jealous that they would like to be a writer but they're not. Is that person someone who will take a one sentence or one typo and say, oh, that ruins the whole book? Does that person maybe have a point about a certain thing? I don't know. But my feeling at this point is I'll kind of say, it's a lousy feeling to have someone disparage my work, let's say. But then I say, you know what? There are people in third world countries right now who have to worry about being able to get fresh water for their, to be able to survive, and for their children. I'll trade that for, an insult. I mean, I can deal with the fact that there's somebody who doesn't like my work or something like that. So in a sense, it's reframing in that way, that you're taking a situation and just making a decision that really it's not going to bother you because, quite frankly, it doesn't need to bother you. There are too many other things that would be much worse, which, again, does not mean we need to take out our emotion or our humanity and our feelings about those sort of things. It just means we need to maybe put them in a different perspective in order to handle them more positively.
Right. Okay. Good. Well, I'll try to remember that next time the mammoth runs around in my head and screaming that it's being treated unfairly by the world, because it happens every now and then. So I'll give you one last example for my last topic. Just today, I got a message from one of my former customers. I had a speaking gig there not long ago. Everything went fine, great customers, and afterwards I sent them my invoice for my moderate fee. And then they let me know, oh, by the way, there needs to be a purchase order number on it. Could you please fill out this form? Okay, I fill out the form. And then they told me, oh, by the way, we need your acceptance of these terms. And then the mammoth in my head says, what? You show me your terms now that I've already done everything? I've been there, I did my stuff, and I send you the invoice, and now you show me your terms? Why don't you pay my freaking invoice, for God's sake, and don't bother me with your bureaucracy? I haven't replied yet. Well, I have not replied because I read your book, and you said wait for a while. And this is what I do now. I have chocolates. I am in Brussels. I am in Brussels, and it's the country with the best chocolate. Some say the best chocolate in the world, and this is my favorite chocolate shop, and I have to earn them. And I only earn my chocolate when I stay nice. So I am not going to reply to that email today because I will not have earned my chocolate tonight. And so far it's working. I can tell you it is working. I've been nice to everyone for the whole week, and I've been eating chocolate. I will have another problem in a year, I think. How do you like that strategy? Is that good?
Well, yeah, whatever is going to work for you is what is going to work for you, and that's what you need to do. The big thing is with this particular client, you do need to either write an email or call on the phone, but you need to be able to communicate with them where this isn't necessarily a proper way for it to be handled, but do it in terms of an I message, as opposed to, you're doing this to me, or you're doing this, you should have done that, which, again, it hurts their ego, it attacks their ego, it makes them defensive, it makes them, and so what you might say is, I've so enjoyed working with you, I have some confusion in terms of the way this has been handled, and I'm wondering if we could work together to clarify it. And then you go through and you state the challenge, and then you make the request that way. And whether you do that by email or by phone, whichever you feel is going to be most appropriate and effective, that's what you would do. But the best thing you did first was you did wait. And whether that's incentivizing yourself with the chocolates, which I can imagine are just amazing, or another way, it was great that you responded rather than reacting to it.
Right. Yeah. And I love how you reframe it to what are you doing to me now? To I have such a pleasurable engagement with you and your employees, and this sort of doesn't really fit in. How do I need to see this email message? That's an entirely different way of coping with that. I love that. Thank you so much. So my last question before we go back to the boss, Lisette, she's still there and watching every minute of this. How are you going to convince us to buy your book, Bob? How are you influencing us to buy your book?
Well, hopefully the people who've listened to our discussion, have felt that they might like to look more into it, and if they would, they could go to Burg, which is burg.com, and on the right-hand side, there's a graphic of the book, Adversaries into Allies, and if they'll click on this, it will take them to a page where they can get Chapter 1. If they, at the top of the page, if they subscribe to my Influence and Success Insights, they can also get Chapter 1 of The Go-Giver, which is another one of my books that that they may enjoy. But I really, really suggest if they haven't gotten your book yet, that they go ahead and do that, because I've got to tell you, not only was it a very, very enjoyable read, it really, I thought the way that you approached these situations that were so well thought out, and the way the premises were discussed, and just could make such a huge difference with any team, with its ability to not only produce more, but really be happier with where they are and who their teammates are. So congratulations on a wonderful effort, and for being number 40 on that that very prestigious list.
Thank you so much, Bob. I understand you're one of the nicest persons on the list. I'm quite sure. I already noticed that when reading your book. So congrats on that one as well. Let's go back to Lisette. Lisette, is there somebody from the audience, perhaps? Do you have a question for us, or is everyone has been watching with their mouths open and in silence?
I think that's indeed the case. Everybody's watching with their mouth open. We did have quite a few people watching, so thanks everybody for joining us. And you should be able to see an image of Bob's book in the panel for the people who are watching, and a link to where you can get that. But again, you can find more information at burg.com. And if you'd like to know about more about Jurgen's new book, Management 3.0 Workout, you can visit management30.com. And from there, I'd like to thank you both for the great conversation. We'll be writing it up with some notes later, and be sure to send that out. But thank you both, and I'll go ahead and stop the broadcast.
All right, thank you, Lisette. And here's my kudo card for Bob. Look at that. Thanks, Bob.
Wow, thank you.
great job on the book, and thanks for joining us today. It's been a pleasure.
The pleasure's mine. Thank you, both.
And I will look you up next time I'm in the U.S. That's a promise. And I might bring some of these with me if they allow me they allow me into the country.
Oh, they'll allow it.
With me, that is always a bit of an issue in the U.S. But those are stories I can tell you later more about. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.